Welcome to Drive the Daf, clear, structured explanation of the daily Daf in 20 minutes. You can even follow in the car.
Beitzah Daf Dalid. We begin at the bottom of Daf Chav Gimel, where we start the third perek of the Masechta, which introduces the topic of hunting, the malacha of tzeda, hunting animals in order to eat. Now, most malachos for food preparation are permitted on Yom Tov. However, hunting is forbidden. Hunting is one which is forbidden. The halachos of hunting are not discussed much in depth in Masechtas Shabbos, but they are discussed here at length. The daf will begin with the Mishnah that starts the perek, and we'll have another Mishnah along the way. The first subject is, how do we define hunting and trapping precisely? So the question to be determined is, when is an animal considered to be caught? Now, that is a significant halacha as far as knowing when you've accomplished trapping and when it's already caught, so that there is no longer any further trapping. Okay, so an animal from the wild which is put into the state called caught would be trapped. That would be the malacha of tzeda. An animal which is already in the state called caught, which you then go trap further, or you make more restrictions on its movement, would not be a malacha of tzeda because it's already been caught. So we need to know what's caught and what's not caught. So our Mishnah begins by referring to fish, wild animals, and birds, and it discusses ones that are in a pen or corral of some sort. That could apply to all three of those. Fish could have a enclosed area within the water in which they're still free to swim. And the halacha that the Mishnah says is that you are not allowed to trap fish, but you are allowed to trap birds and wild animals in this corral. Now, fish which you are not allowed to trap, you're also not allowed to feed. The halacha is that any wild animal you're not allowed to feed. But birds and wild animals which are caught, once they're caught, since in a corral they're considered caught, you are allowed to feed them. That's the Tanna Kamma's opinion. Shimon ben Gamliel says not all corrals and enclosures are the same. It depends on the corral and the enclosure. And therefore it doesn't go by the rule of is it in the corral or is it not in the corral. It goes by is it considered caught or is it not considered caught. He doesn't define what's considered caught and what's not, and the Gemara will go further and define that. So first, the Gemara's first approach here, the Gemara begins, the Gemara has a contradiction as far as birds and wild animals. We had said that birds and wild animals in a corral is considered caught. The Gemara brings another Beitzah which says that birds and wild animals are not considered caught. The Beitzah says that birds and wild animals in a corral, you are not allowed to go take them on Yom Tov. That means they're not considered caught. If you were allowed to go take them, it would be considered caught already. It also says that you're not allowed to feed them. So how do we resolve this contradiction? So the Gemara first deals with the contradiction of animals to animals, and it says there's a machlokes between Rabbi Yehuda and the Rabbanon whether animals in a corral are considered caught or not. And so it could be that our Mishnah is one opinion and the Beitzah that we've just quoted is the other opinion. Where do you see this machlokes? Machlokes is in a Mishnah, which might be a Beitzah according to the Haggah. The Mishnah says that if you lock a deer in a house, that's definitely trapped. If you lock it in a corral, that's a machlokes. According to Rabbi Yehuda, in a corral, a deer is not considered to be caught. According to the Chachamim, it is considered to be caught. And therefore, maybe that'll be an explanation as to why our Mishnah says that a chaya, a wild animal, like a deer, for example, in a corral is considered to be caught. And in the other Mishnah which we quoted, it's not considered to be caught. So the Gemara says that answers for animals. What do you do about a bird? Rabbi Yehuda and the Chachamim don't argue about a bird. They both agree that the only way that a bird is considered to be caught is if it's caught in a closet. If it's just caught inside a house, it's not considered to be caught. There is no level at which they argue. So Gemara says you'll have to say that there's different types of corrals for a bird. There's one with a roof, one without a roof. The Gemara says that's not going to help. If a corral with a roof is no better than a house, and both Rabbi Yehuda and the Chachamim agree that that's not considered to be caught. And anyway, there's still no difference between them. So the Gemara says, well, we'll have to say then that there are different types of birds. A bird that's accustomed to living in a house can easily escape from you. It knows how to hide in corners. It knows how to run away. Therefore, in a house, it's not considered to be caught. Or in a roofed corral, it's not considered to be caught. However, a bird which is not accustomed is considered caught there because you can easily grab him once he's within the house. Gemara says, well, once you're making differentiations between different types of birds, we could also make differentiations between different types of corrals. And then we don't have to say that the two Mishnayos are arguing, one is the Rabbanan and one is Rabbi Yehuda. We could say that they're both the same opinion, and it makes a differentiation between different sizes of corrals. A large corral, the animal is considered free still, because it can still escape from you, and in a small corral is considered caught. How do you define a large corral and a small corral? So the Gemara gives a few options here. Rav Ashi says, if you grab it in one lunge, that's a small corral. Anything larger than that is a large corral, and it's not considered a caught. Or if it has corners where the animal can hide from you and it can escape and run away, that's considered a large corral. Another way of defining it is if its shadows of the walls fall to the other wall, meaning if the shadow of one wall reaches all the way to the other wall. It's not clear what time of the day, but if the shadow of one wall reaches the other wall, then it's considered to be a small corral. Now, very similar to this is the opinion of Shimon ben Gamliel, who said that it doesn't really matter if it's in a corral or not, it matters whether it's considered caught or not. So the Gemara says that Allah Chazak of Shimon ben Gamliel. Gemara asks, Allah Chazak of Shimon ben Gamliel, that implies that somebody's arguing on him. It's not necessarily a machlokes, or Shimon ben Gamliel could be just explaining what size corral is considered to be caught. So the Gemara says, you're right, there isn't necessarily any machlokes here. I'm just saying the halacha is like what he said. The Gemara uses an expression to show that. So then the Gemara goes further, and the Gemara continues defining what is considered to be a small corral where it's caught, which again would fit into Shimon ben Gamliel's opinion. So the Gemara quotes Rav Yosef, and then Rav Yehuda Shmuel, who says that if you have to bring a net in order to trap it, then it's the large corral. If you don't have to, then it's considered caught already. So Gemara says, 1 second, what about a goose and a chicken? Those people generally will say bring a net so you could trap it, but we know that the halacha is that you're allowed to grab them on Yom Tov. They're considered to be caught already. So Gemara says that's for a different reason. That's because they always come home to roost in their coop at night, and therefore you will have no problem grabbing them at night because they come right home to where you keep them. Since they come home at night, during the day you can also grab them. They're not considered to be wild. They're considered to be something that you own and that you have control over. So Gemara says that's not that can be a valid criteria, because we look at the doves that live in a dovecote or in an aliyah, in an upper floor, and there they come home to roost every night, but you're still not allowed to grab them on Yom Tov. It's still considered to be an Isser. So the Gemara says, okay, so we'll have to say you need two factors. It has to be that they come home at night and that they rely on you for food. Then it's considered like your animal. Just like any animal you have, they come home at night and they rely on you for food. And therefore, those you'd be allowed to grab. And that's why the chicken and the goose you're allowed to grab, even though you need a net to grab it during the day. But the dove, you would not be allowed to grab even though they come home to roost, because the dove doesn't rely on you for its food. The Gemara gives another answer. The Gemara says that the doves run away from you when you try to grab them. These other animals don't run away when you try to grab them. The Gemara says, what do you mean? All animals run away when you try to grab them. The Gemara says, yeah, but these run away even... First of all, they will flee to their coop, and even if you try to grab them from the coop, they'll run away from you there. The chickens and the goose and other animals, they're not going to do that. If you grab them in the coop, you could just reach out and hold them. They won't flee from you there. Okay, this concludes the Gemara's comment on the first Mishnah. Now we get to the next Mishnah. This Mishnah discusses traps. That means if you laid a trap for an animal out in the wild and it caught an animal. Now, the halacha is that a wild animal which is not caught is muktzah. So if Yom Tov or Shabbos began and the animal was wild at that time, it's muktzah. Even if it's caught on Shabbos, it's still not allowed to shecht it, especially in Yom Tov when you're allowed to do shechita. You wouldn't be allowed to shecht it because it's muktzah. It was wild and not belonging to you when Shabbos began. So it's got to be, says the Mishnah, that the animal is caught in the trap before Yom Tov. Then you would be allowed to do shechita on Yom Tov. And it has to be that you know. The implication here is that if it's not clear, if you came and you found it trapped on Yom Tov, you don't know when it was caught, you would have to assume that it was caught on Yom Tov and that it's mukta, and you're not allowed to shecht it at all. The Gemara says that there was a story where a Nachri came and brought fish to Rabban Gamliel, and Gamliel said it's mutter, it's permitted, but I don't like the guy, so I don't want to accept from him. So Gemara says that contradicts the halacha. If the Nachri brought him fish on Yom Tov, he had no way of knowing if it was caught on Yom Tov or before Yom Tov, then it should be aser. Why does the Mishnah say that it's mutter? So Gemara says there's a line missing in the Mishnah. It should say that Rabban Gamliel argues, and Rabban Gamliel says if you're not sure, you could assume it was caught before Yom Tov, and therefore it's not muktzah. However, in this case, even though he holds that way, he didn't want to accept the fish from the Nachri because he didn't like him. Now, the Gemara says Rabbi Yehuda's name was Shmuel that the halacha is not like Rabban Gamliel. Some have that statement on a different Mishnah, on a Beitzah actually, that says if it's a suffix, if it's muktzah or if it's not. Rabban Gamliel says it's mutter, and Rabbi Yeshua says it's aser, and Rabbi Yehuda's name was Shmuel. The halacha is like Rabbi Yeshua. And some have it on a different Beitzah which discusses shchita in a corral, if you have an animal in a corral. So it says you're allowed to take an animal from the corral on Yom Tov and shachta because that was not muktzah, belongs to you. But if it's coming from a net or from a trap, Shimon ben Elazar says as follows: if you find it messed up, you find it tangled before Yom Tov, you know it was there before Yom Tov and it's mutter. If you find it tangled only on Yom Tov, you know it was not trapped before Yom Tov, and therefore it was muktzah and it's aser. So the Gemara says this is contradictory over here. When you tell me I find it trapped on Yom Tov, you mean to say that I know that it was trapped on Yom Tov. That means to say that I checked it before Yom Tov and it was not tangled. Now Rashi just explains the tangle, you don't necessarily see the animal. Some of these nets were very long, almost up to a mil long or half a mil long, and just because you saw the ropes twisted and snapped on one end, it doesn't mean you can see that the animal was there. But if you see the tangles, if you see that the thing is entwined, then you know that the animal is there already. But either way, we have our contradiction. And the Gemara says, I don't understand. You tell me if I came and I checked it before Yom Tov and the animal was there already, fine. Then I know that it's not muktzah. If I only came and checked it, if I know that it was caught on Yom Tov, then it is muktzah. That's a contradiction as to what happens if I don't know. If I didn't check it before Yom Tov, I only find an animal there on Yom Tov, I don't know when it showed up. So Gemara says you should read it like this: if you came and you don't know when it was caught, that's the same thing as if it was caught on Yom Tov. You should assume it was caught on Yom Tov, and therefore it is aser, and a suffix is considered to be aser. So that is the case here of this machlokes. And who does his name was Shmuel on that? That the halacha is like Rabbi Shimon ben Elazar, who says that you have to assume that it is aser. The Gemara now moves to analyze the opinion of Rabban Gamliel. Rabban Gamliel had said that it's mutter, and specifically had the case of the fish that was brought to him, and he said it's mutter. So the Gemara wants to know, mutter means what? It's permitted to do what? Rav says it's mutter to touch, mutter to accept them. They're not muktzah, but you're still not allowed to eat them because they might be caught on Yom Tov. Levi says no, you're even allowed to eat them. Says Rav, somebody should never avoid the Beis Medrash. He should never miss being in the Beis Medrash, because this is why there's a machlokes between Levi and myself. Even for 1 hour, you shouldn't miss the Beis Medrash. Levi and I were both in front of Rebbe when he said over the sugya, and he said over the halacha that it's mutter. And in the evening, he said it's mutter to eat. At night, when he said the shir at first, he said it's mutter to eat. And then in the morning, he changed, and he said, no, it's only mutter to accept them. It's only not muktzah, but you're not allowed to eat them. And I was there, and I know that he changed, and therefore I changed my psak. But Levi was not there, so he missed the changed psak, and that's why he still holds that it's mutter to eat. And he's not aware that Rebbe changed and made that it's only mutter to accept. Telimor has a kasha from a Beitzah. It says that a nachri who brings a gift to Yisrael, even if he brings moist fish or fresh fruit that were picked that day, and this gift is brought on Yom Tov, it's permitted. So Gemara says, so now this fish was obviously fished out today on Yom Tov, and this fruit was obviously picked today on Yom Tov. So the Gemara says, now I understand why it's not muktzah, but why should you be allowed to eat it? So according to the opinion, it says you're allowed to eat it, it doesn't make sense. So the Gemara says, why should it not be muktzah? You understand why it's not muktzah? I don't understand why it's not muktzah. If it's picked or fished on Yom Tov, it should be muktzah. It must be referring to where it was fresh, it was moist, and it was fresh, but it wasn't from that day. That means the fish were still slightly red. It means they had some signs of life to them that they hadn't been dead for that long, but not that they were fished out that day. And the fruit were freshly pickled and preserved, but they weren't still moist as if they were picked that day. Now, what's a chiddush here? Even though they appear to be fresh, they have the look of being fresh, but they're not really fresh, and therefore you're allowed to eat them, or they're not muktzah, whichever way you want to understand it, but not referring to where it was picked that day itself. Now, says Rav Papa, the halacha is that if a nachri brings a gift to Yisrael on Yom Tov, so it depends if that is still connected to the ground, if that species is still growing somewhere. If it's still growing somewhere, you have to be afraid that he picked it off, and therefore it's usher today, and it's usher until after Yom Tov, until enough time that you could go get it yourself, so you don't benefit from the malacha that the nachri did for you. If it is not available, so then you have to know if it came from inside the tchum or outside the tchum. You have to try to figure out if it's from inside the tchum. If it's from outside the tchum, then again it's forbidden because the guy brought it from outside the tchum for you, and you have to wait again until after Yom Tov. If, however, he brought it for one Yisrael, then a different Yisrael is allowed to use it. So it's only forbidden, a violation of tchum by a nachri is only forbidden for the Yisrael that he did it for. A different Yisrael would be allowed to use it right away.
Drive the Daf is a project of the Grand Woodlands Shul and is presented by Rabbi Yitzchak Landa. Find us on YouTube or subscribe to daily emails by emailing drivethedaf@gmail.com.